As they say in hockey, let's do that hockey.
Play a full 60 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple.
Get pucks deep, bring the puck deep.
Put pucks in deep.
We got to keep it simple and just get pucks going forward.
Getting into the forecheck.
We got to keep playing aggressive.
Trying to take away their time and space.
We're focused on tonight. We just got to stick to our game.
It is the 1-year anniversary of the Fifth Liners Hockey Podcast, and what a time to welcome back an original member. Colin Kapoor is aboard here with myself and Jake Swanson, and the Stanley Cup preview episode as we have a rematch just in time for the 1-year anniversary. Go take it back right to where we started, as well as one of our most special guests. We just interviewed AJ Oscarson, the producer behind Gabe Landeskog's A Clean Sheet documentary. That coming up in about 50 minutes or so here. We sat down with him for just over a half hour, and kind of a tear-jerking experience for him. The final episode of that docuseries upcoming on June 9th, and we are very appreciative and excited to be a part of him telling that story. But first, let's catch up here and get into some NHL preview and reviews. Colin, you're the guy who's got to take it away here. I think it's been a while since we've caught up and talked. You've been out killing it on the West Coast in Tahoe. How's life been, buddy?
It's been a year, so it's been a lot. A lot's happened. It's great to be back, though, and it's funny that you mention the fact that I'm returning a year to the day, and also we're talking about the exact same Stanley Cup Finals matchup that we did a year ago, and so we can get into that. I think my opinions and my takes are probably going to be a little bit different than what I said last year. I don't really remember what I said last year, but I'm sure I'll say some different things. But it's great to be back, Casey, and with Jake. It's been a while, but I'm happy to be back with you guys. It'll be we'll have some fun here today.
Alan's our big guy in the pros. We've got Jake Swanson, who was watching the pros. He's got the Cleveland Guardians jersey on. Just got back from a baseball game, baseball season in full swing. Jake, what's happening?
Yeah, that's all that's going on in my life right now is baseball and hockey. Those the two sports that we love. And yeah, no, just saw the Guards take home a win against the LA Angels. And yeah, I've been playing, I've been coaching. So pretty much every day has been either baseball in the morning and watching hockey at night. So I'd say it's a pretty good life right there. So
that's a good day. You know what? That's a great day.
And I can't forget, Colin was also a baseball commentator there, so he knows exactly what a great day at a ballpark is like. So
I'm out on the West Coast trying to catch up with jet lag, catching some sun, something that these Rochester, New York guys are not used to. 74 straight days of rain in Rochester, New York. So just about the first time I've seen sun in a while here. My cousin's graduation, so we're all pumped up for a grad party later this evening here, but I'm more pumped to talk about the NHL and the rematch upcoming in the Stanley Cup Final. Surprisingly, I'm not devastated by the performance of the Carolina Hurricanes. I think Dallas has a lot more reason to be upset here, but let's kick it off in the East. Florida and Carolina, a 5-game series where the Panthers did everything that would go along with domination except for finish with a sweep. The curse is finally over. Carolina got their one game, now 1-16 since winning the Cup in 2006 in Eastern Conference Final games. I'll take it, though. They got their one. Gents, let's start with, overall thoughts on the series here. It's hard not to shake a head at how good Florida is. And I got the opportunity to watch game 2 in person. I was blown away by just how dominant this team looks. They zip it around the offensive zone. They're hard on the forecheck, kind of the exact style Carolina, as Rod Brindamore said after, wants to play. They are the standard and they execute on it.
Yeah, Casey, first things first, for the Caniac over here, got to raise that banner now. Got one win in the East, or the whatever round it was. You got to get that going and have a celebration starting next year. But talking about the Panthers, I mean, it was probably clear that, the East was going to run through Florida at the outset of the playoffs, the way that the regular season went as well. And They made the cup in the last 2 years. They won last season and they upgraded, going into these playoffs with Marchand and with Seth Jones. So you knew that this was going to happen. I did not expect to be as clinical as it was in that last round against the Canes. It just looked like each and every game it was getting more and more embarrassing for Carolina. And actually, I think that's the wrong word because Florida is just that good. There's not much embarrassing about it. But yeah, it was like you watch game one and you're like, okay, I think we can see where this is going to go from here. And that's exactly what happened. I think clinical execution, this is a really tough team. They're impossible to play against. And these are the same words that we used last year to describe this team. It's an identity that's been built over years and years. And it just works in the playoffs. And that's what makes them so impressive, man. Like, you know what's going to happen. If you're Carolina, you know exactly what you're walking into. There's just nothing you can do about it. And that's what makes them so successful. And that's what makes them. I haven't looked at the odds at this point for the Cup. I have to imagine they're the favorites right now, especially with the playoff experience that they've got. So that's what makes them such a really great team. And the fact that they got better after last season is really something. Marchand, as a guy that spent the last 4 years in Boston, I can tell you, Boston fans are probably going to be happy that he has a chance at a ring. They are going to be closing their eyes during the Cup final if Marchand goes out there and puts on a show, because for a Boston fan, you never want to see Florida succeed after the past few years, and you never want your guy to be the guy that helps them in that scenario. So it's going to be a really exciting Cup final, but man, what wasn't that as clinical of a series as you can see between Florida and Carolina?
Yeah, and for me, I just really enjoyed the performances of all the key players on the Panthers. I mean, Bob had a great series. I think he's just been on fire. I mean, I remember when he was in Columbus, like seeing the things that he was doing there and now doing it in the playoffs in deep playoff runs 2 years in a row here. I think he's going to be a huge X factor for the Panthers going forward. And I mean, Casey knows how much I love to talk about the goaltenders, so I really enjoyed seeing that. And then I mean, just Barkov and Kachuk up front. I mean, those two alone can get you to the second round of the playoffs, and then they just have depth after that. So I think the depth of this team and the way that they just put away a very dangerous Carolina Hurricanes team, I think it's going to be very tough to bet against them in the Stanley Cup final. And I think game one really is going to set the tone. As cliche as it is, if we see Bob turn out like a 1 goal or a shutout performance, I think it's going to be a telltale sign of what's to come here in the longest the farthest matchup between two Stanley Cup opponents for the second year in a row. So they're going to be fighting jet lag just like you, Casey, but I think it might be a little bit tougher for them.
Answer Colin's query there. It is the Panthers as slight underdogs, plus 100 on the number. So if you can count that as an underdog,
Vegas
the Oilers are minus
revenge,
120.
Casey.
That's right. But that's where the book makes its money. There's a bit of a gap there in 20 of those odds between plus 100 and minus 120. But maybe a spot to go throw some dough on as the defending champs are being faded at dead even odds. I want to talk about Carolina, and I was disappointed as a diehard Carolina Hurricanes fan in the attitude of the fan base all around game two. I think there was a lot of hope going into this one. I would say I was right on that the Canes had a chance to make the Cup final. I would say by the second intermission, down 3 or 4-0 there in game two, it was pretty clear that it was going to be closer to a sweep than a Stanley Cup appearance. But there were so many fans that were calling anywhere from Brindamore needing to be fired. This team needs to be dismantled. Colin, I want to shout you out here because you had your hand on the pulse of the Metro better than anybody on our Metropolitan preview, calling the Capitals to be up there with the best of the best in the Metro and the Hurricanes to be closer to a non-playoff team, which obviously the Canes went a little farther than that, but the Capitals overimpressed. But I want to go back to that sentiment because I don't think any of us had the Canes better than number 3 in the conference with what we thought was going to be somewhere between Capitals, Rangers, and New Jersey Devils dominating this conference. The Canes way overimpressed that. This was supposed to be a rebuild year where they lose all kinds of list of names between Pesce, Shea, Steph Nason, Marty Necas gets traded away early. A lot of big-time players left this roster. Do you guys think that the fans' displeasure is warranted or unwarranted here, including the calls for Rod Brind'Amour, who is 7 for 7 in not only making the playoffs, but advancing past the first round? For me, I think it is absolutely blasphemous.
Yeah, I think you look at the body of work for the team and for him in particular, and I'd say it's probably not the solution that some fans think it would be. And you know what? Emotions are high. You're losing 5-0 in game 2. You're losing 6-2 in game 3. I kind of get it, but I think there is something to be said about what brought you to that point, and also the team that you're facing. Florida's like I said, and like we've been saying, is a dynamic juggernaut of a team, and the coaching necessarily is not going to be the thing that gets you over the hump. And I think back to that episode we recorded, Casey, and this was, I believe, back in early September, late August, when we were previewing things, and we talked about, you mentioned, you used the word dismantling of the team. That's what kind of the fans are calling for. And we talked about in that preview that the Canes had already kind of done that, the end of the previous season into that offseason with high profile names going elsewhere, right? And they succeeded in spite of what happened, and maybe in some cases because of what happened in the offseason and at the end of last year. So a lot of that you can attribute to coaching, and I don't think there's going to be a change. I think cooler heads will prevail, and obviously the heads in ownership and in high level positions stay cool until things get really, really tricky and dicey. But I think it's very easy to see the final scores of the first 3 games of that series and be like, I want to blow this place up and set everything on fire. But you take 2 weeks after a series ends and you kind of reflect on things with a cooler head, and you have to assume that the right decision will be made here. I think Rod Brind'Amour is a really excellent coach in a lot of ways. And, you think back to that Washington Capitals series. Obviously, I was not happy with the outcome there. Watching that last game was pretty tough after the season that the Caps had. But the Caps, the way that the Canes played against Washington and in their round 1 series was excellent. Like they stifled defensively the Caps side. I don't know if they got more than 20 shots on goal in a game in that series. Like that's the way that Carolina was controlling things. So yeah, I don't think this is a sentiment on the fan base that should last. Casey, you can probably speak to it if it's going to throughout the offseason in terms of trying to make a change up top. I don't see why it should. And I think that the Canes are probably going to be more well poised to be a good team next year if Brind'Amour's still there.
Yeah, I completely agree, Colin. I mean, if anything, I don't think the change would come at the coaching level. I think their coaching has been solid for years at this point, and Brind'Amour is exactly the kind of guy you want at the helm, especially in those high pressure situations. He has the experience. Obviously, he doesn't have the greatest record in the Eastern Conference Finals, but it's just one of those humps you have to get over, and I believe that he will. I think more likely the change is probably going to come at the GM level and see if that does something. I think there was a lot of scrutiny around the whole Mikko Rantanen thing, and I know that wasn't necessarily all the Canes' fault. So I again hesitate to say that there's going to be a change, but for me, if there is going to be one, it's going to be at that level rather than that, because I know they have a lot of cap space coming up, and I know, Casey, you've harped on this a lot in other episodes that we've done, and there's some really potential impactful free agents out there in this offseason that they can go for. And I think that would be more of a way to kind of bolster them up rather than tearing down the head coach and kind of tearing down what success you have gone through in the last 3, 4, 5 years. So, I mean, take a look at Carolina like a decade ago and see where they are now. And I think Canes fans would rather be in 2025 than 2015. So I think we got to see what's going to happen in this offseason. But honestly, it's, again, not a knock on the Canes. I think they did a hell of a job to get to another conference final, and just they ran into a Florida team that's basically like a brick wall. So they're going to have to find their bulldozer this offseason.
And I think it's also worth noting on the Mikko Rantanen front what they got back, because especially in this Eastern Conference final, the only true performer was Logan Stankoven. They also got 3 first-round picks on top of him. Guys, let's close off the Eastern Conference final here. A little bit of dramatics in the handshake line. Paul Maurice, his decision that he says the handshake line should be for players. It looked as though Rod Brindamore had some displeasure with that. Those two guys are familiar friends. What were your thoughts there on the handshake dispute?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I know, like, it seems interesting to me that would be something that Maurice would be that adamant about. I think it's still like an interesting decision, just because, I mean, Brindamore also wants to like say good luck in the finals, like go win that thing, like, and he's got some friends on the other side as well. I mean, they know each other pretty well, so I'm intrigued by it. I don't think it's like a terribly bad like take to say, hey, let's have the coaches do their own thing and have the players do their own thing. But I mean, to me, it seems kind of just irrelevant to the moment, and probably could have been handled better. But again, you're coming off a very emotional game, especially for the Hurricanes, and Brindamore was probably just like, this is the last thing I need right now. So I don't know. I'm kind of just ambivalent about it. There's no two ways about it. So I'm interested because especially like in baseball, I mean, coaches shake hands all the time after games. So it's an interesting one for me.
Yeah, I think it's a little weird. Like, I think Jake, you kind of hit it on the head. Like, it was handled interestingly by Paul Maurice. I think the quote was like, there was 400 people on the ice and they weren't in the game, or like the staffers and the coaches. I mean, that was obviously a hyperbole, exaggeration, but even so, like, I think there's something to be said. I think his whole thing was like the sanctity of the people on the ice that played should be in the handshake line, right? But I think, I mean, you kind of just talked about it. Like, I think there's a place for coaches there. I think there's a place for the people that help build out that team or help manage that team or whatever it is, especially on the bench, behind the bench. So, yeah, I mean, it's a non-issue right at this point, but it was kind of a weird headline to see. You know, the Panthers are out there. They are making their 3rd straight Cup final, and you're scrolling Twitter, and the headline is there should be no coaches in the handshake line. Like, it's kind of interesting, and it probably speaks to, you know, why people don't like getting takes on Twitter and things like that, because that's obviously not the story that should be, you know, circulating at that moment. But it is kind of interesting, and I feel like Jake, I don't think I think it's a non-issue. Like, it's just something to talk about, and we're kind of, I guess we're falling into the trap of talking about it, but, you know, it is what it is. Like, but yeah, I think ambivalent is the right word there.
Rod Brindamore got torn apart throughout this series, whether it was the reaction to that, the Jackie Redmond interview where he was displeased with the refs and she had to go diving to his relief, saying that it wasn't disrespect, that he's one of the nicest coaches out there, or what I was talking about with the fans calling for his job. Hopefully he can go sit by a lake or something and kick some feet up for the next couple of months to regroup here. On to the West Coast, in Edmonton over Dallas, again, a 5-game set. I would say this one was much less anticipated for a quick ending to a series than the Eastern Conference was. The big news, Connor McDavid touched the Clarence Campbell Trophy. Guys, your thoughts there?
Well, he said he didn't touch it last year, and it didn't work out for him. So Trying to switch up the juju. That's all I got.
Yeah. I mean, same here. I mean, if one thing doesn't work, try the other thing. And if this doesn't work, then
Maybe it had nothing to do with anything to begin with.
yeah, I don't know. I think he might need to go see like a witch doctor or something to get his juju reversed or something. I don't know. But yeah, this is always the most interesting thing for me because being a big MLB fan, there's no like East and West champions. So like this trope in the NHL with the champions trophies from the semifinals, like it's definitely like a from anyone outside of hockey, you're like, what in the hell is going on and why is this so important? But when you look into it, it's just like, man, professional athletes are just so superstitious and it's insane. And this is like the most visible part of their superstition. I mean, nobody even sees what goes on in like the locker rooms and what they do pregame. So I think it's fun to kind of talk about, but I mean, who knows? Hopefully it works out for McDavid, at least for my opinion, but I don't know. We'll see.
Not sure if you guys zoomed in on that.
Oh yeah, if the Oilers do win it all, the first thing McDavid's going to say is, "Well, I touched that trophy after winning the Western Conference Finals, and that's why I'm here right now." It all's going to come together at the end if it works out.
If you saw the picture there and zoomed in on his face, he looks like an absolute stone cold killer. I tweeted it out and zoomed right in on the mug. He looks like a guy ready to go out and put up 7 points a night here. First, before we get into Edmonton, on the Dallas front. In that game 5, Ottinger lets in 2 goals on 2 shots. Pete DeBoer immediately pulls him. The controversy afterwards was DeBoer kind of putting the weight of the loss to the fault of Ottinger. Did you guys agree with the decision, the short leash on Ottinger? Where do you see the future of Pete DeBoer as well going forward? Because it kind of seems like this might be a turning point where you've got to make the decision between keeping Ottinger or keeping DeBoer going forward.
This is a really tough one for me, and it's hitting at the things I like to talk about the most, which is goalies. And Ottinger, I mean, he showed during like the Four Nations face-off of what he can do and what kind of goaltender he can be. And I mean, he showed it for the U.S. team in the past as well, and for Dallas. So keeping him on that short of a leash, especially in an elimination game, I get it to a point where you're trying to do everything you can to stay in the game. And who knows, maybe there was something on the bench that the coaching staff saw that they were like, okay, this isn't looking good, and we got to put DeSmith in. But I feel like you have to give a certain level of respect to one of the best goaltenders in the game. And especially in an elimination game. Like, he can definitely say, hey, that's my bad. These 2 goals were just not in my character. Let's keep going. I'll be a brick wall from now on. Like, it's tough when you're in that moment and you have to make that decision. I equate it to pulling pitchers after like 6 or 7 innings and having to make that decision to go to the bullpen. And that's kind of what this is. So I think Ottinger is going to be understandably upset, and I saw like the comparisons to him on Twitter of him and Patrick Waugh of when Waugh got pulled in his last game as a Canadian, and you gotta wonder if that's going to be a similar trope here if Ottinger's going to go somewhere else. But I mean, DeBoer, to me, head coaches are easier to replace than star goaltenders. So logically, you should keep Ottinger, but we all know that that's not how everything works in the NHL. So I'll be interested to see what happens in the offseason to see if there's any kind of talks between him and the Stars franchise and the owners and saying like, hey, didn't really appreciate that. Like, what's going to go on in the future? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting storyline for sure.
It will be very interesting. I think to Pete DeBoer's credit, while I don't think I agree with the decision, I think I do respect that he's sticking with it and he's taking the fire as it comes to him because, if indeed taking Ottinger out, DeSmith comes in and it sparks the team, as was his rationale at the end of the game, he's going to look like the biggest genius of all time, right? Like, that's what's going to happen, and that's what the narrative is going to be. And so I think that him, he's done a few like media appearances since, and he said essentially that he said, I have to make those calls, like I have to have those hard conversations. And I think there is something to be said about a coach sticking to his guns in that way. I don't necessarily know, like it's a very old school way of thinking, like you take a goalie out and the rest of the team responds. I don't think there's too much like statistical basis in that I haven't dug deep into it, to be fair, but I don't necessarily think that's the way to go about that. And yeah, it's an elimination game. You got to do what you got to do. I think that on the player's side, I totally get where Ottinger is coming from. He said that it's humiliating, that it's embarrassing, and you have to understand that, right? Like it's definitely a really tough spot to be in. And so controversy wise, I don't think, and obviously I don't know, none of us are in the room when these conversations are happening, but I don't see like this is gonna like roll over and be a whole thing going forward, between the two, because I think if Pete DeBoer went out there after and kind of second guessed himself, maybe there'd be more of a controversy. But I think the way it was handled, even after a loss, it was pretty professional. And I think the one thing that stuck out to me, the quote from Pete DeBoer, I think it was right post game. And so emotions are high. You understand that he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to have to explain his actions to the media. I've run into that before after losses, talking to coaches, but he said Ottinger gave up, I think it was 16 goals, or lost 6 games or 5 games, whatever it was, to Edmonton going back to last year. He gave up 2 goals on 2 shots, so I had to make this change. I think that it kind of speaks to a lack of trust, like you said, Jake, going forward in that game. Like the mentality for the goaltender is, sorry, I gave up these goals. I trust you guys to pick me up. I'm not going to give up any goals in the rest of this game, right? And I think that's the player mentality. And for the coach to hook him right then and there, I think maybe speaks to the lack of trust in that moment. And that's something that might be difficult to get over. But I would say overall, I don't think that there's any risk of this boiling over into next year. I think I think it's pretty cemented that he's one of the best goalies in the entire league, one of the best young goalies that we've seen in a long time. So I don't see that changing, and I don't see, there being a huge issue between the coach and the player moving forward into next year.
Also worth noting, Ottinger will be in the first year of an 8-year extension that he signed in the fall, starting next year. So for me, it's pretty clear that would side the end of Pete DeBoer if anything's going to happen over the offseason. Hard to do also to a coach who just went to back-to-back Western Conference finals. So maybe that's something, Colin, as you mentioned, that kind of you have to wait for it to cool down, and it has to come to just a conversation between guys that, hey, I made this decision for a reason. Obviously, it didn't work out, but we have to have trust in you going forward because you're our guy for the next 8 years. Also, something I found kind of interesting, there was not much in DeBoer's decision-making between line changes when the offense cooled down. Mikko Rantanen was one guy that went completely quiet. 19 points, 10 goals in the first 11 games, just 2 points, both that came on assists in the final 7 games as Dallas went and got ousted. And a lot of that came the same on the top 6, guys like Matt Duchene, who had been a huge piece of the offense, who didn't really do anything except for going minus 15 throughout the playoffs. Wyatt Johnston on pace for breaking the record in the playoff masters that Matt Leonardo would so deeply like. He was minus 18 at one point there. Big name guys like that just couldn't find anything going, but the Stars didn't really change up their lineup at all. Something that I found a little bit head scratching, that you might want to see another thing maybe that would go against Pete DeBoer. On the Edmonton side, the biggest news came in the injury front. Zach Hyman now out for the rest of the postseason, underwent surgery earlier this week, and he was key in kind of the turning point of this series, that big-time home win that the Oilers had there. 2 goals in that one. Obviously a key piece of the goal scoring for the Edmonton Oilers, although McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins have been able to drive the bus so far. How big of a factor do you guys see this being with Hyman now out for good?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a lot more pressure on McDavid and Draisaitl. But I mean, we've been saying that all along, with all the way back to our Pacific Division preview. Like, we were questioning the Oilers' depth, we were questioning their scoring depth, and we were like, okay, this is going to be McDavid and Draisaitl season, or else it's not going to be a season. And they proved us wrong. They got all the way back to the Stanley Cup Finals for another rematch against the Panthers, and I think it's just going to fall to them again. And it's even more pressure again because it's the Stanley Cup Final, and it's exactly what you've been working for. But I think they're built for this pressure. I think McDavid especially is built for this pressure. He didn't have a McDavid-esque season that we're so used to seeing in the regular season, yet he's at the top of the points for playoff scoring. And Draisaitl's right behind him, and he's just coming off that huge extension and a really good season in the regular season. So I tend to side with, like, yes, it's going to hurt, but I think it's going to be less noticeable because it's in the forward core. I think if they had some more defensive injuries, I would be a little bit more worried, just because I don't know about their depth there. But I think because they already have that scoring between the top two guys, I think it's going to be less noticeable than it would have been. But I still think it's going to be a tougher test, especially on the special teams now. You got one less body to work with out there. So I think Edmonton's going to have to find out who's going to step up, who's going to be that next guy, the next man mentality.
Yeah, I think there's a few avenues here where you're going to see this really kind of rear its head. Jake, you talked about the special teams. Also, doing against Florida and against Bobrovsky, getting the puck in close to the net and executing there. It's where Hyman made a lot of his money. With Edmonton was getting goals on rebounds, or at the very least creating screens, things like that. And yeah, you're going to have to adjust the way you play without him there, and you're going to have to put someone else in, and we'll see how that, game plan wise, how that comes to fruition as the series, the Cup Final begins, and we'll probably see it on the first few shifts what Edmonton plans to do without one of their top players. So yeah, it's going to be a change. It's obviously so frustrating. It has to be so frustrating for him to not be on the ice after the way that Edmonton had played and his performance all season. So that's a tough aspect of it too. But you got to focus on a next man up mentality. That's what playoffs is. You got to win 16 games one way or another to win the cup. So there's going to be an unheralded hero if Edmonton is going to win. It's not just going to be McDavid and Draisaitl, because it can't be at this point. They're not going to score every single goal. It would be cool, but I don't think it's going to happen. So yeah, we're going to see how they kind of play this. I think in front of the net, that's going to be a big part of it. Jake, you mentioned special teams, and I'm interested to see who steps up. I think that's going to be the big question. Is it going to be, one of these bottom six players that gets their shine in a bigger spot? I think that's going to be the big question here.
Great opportunity to throw some snaps to Jeff Skinner, who steps in there Game 5 after being benched through a 0-2 deficit against the LA Kings, gets his first ever playoff goal, his first ever playoff win as a member of the Edmonton Oilers after so many years with the Buffalo Sabres not being able to play in a single playoff game. I think that's the scariest part about the Edmonton Oilers too. You think about the big ads in the offseason were Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson. Both of them have been sitting in the press box at this point to the playoffs, and either of them could be unleashed given injury opportunities. Rupe Hintz fractured his foot in Game 2. That was another big piece of this series in the struggles Dallas had. Also took a little bit of a dirty slash in Game 4 when he came back. Evan Bouchard hitting him on that same foot that it came out later was indeed fractured on a slash by Darnell Nurse. And that just shows how important certain key factors are to success of offense. Dallas got all this way without Miro Heiskanen for a big piece of the playoffs. Unfortunately, the injury to Rupe Hintz seemed to be a big piece. Jason Robertson also overcoming injury, another kind of unwritten storyline throughout this series. but the Cup Final is now set. And the rematch of last season where Florida won in 7, the Panthers dominating games 1 through 3, starting the celebration a little too early as the Oilers stomped back in games 4 through 6 and pushed to game 7, where ultimately the Panthers were able to raise Lord Stanley at home. This year, though, the Edmonton Oilers are the home team. How about this stat? It is just the 5th time since the expansion era began in 1967 that there's been a repeat of the Cup Final. That's the 68-69 Montreal Canadiens versus St. Louis Blues, 77 and 78 Canadiens and Bruins, 93 and 84 Islanders versus Oilers, and 2008-2009 Red Wings versus Penguins. Most notably, the most recent of those two in the Islanders-Oilers and Red Wings-Penguins series included what Connor McDavid is striving to do here following a couple of big-time legends, Wayne Gretzky and Sidney Crosby, who are on each of those teams that lost the first and won the second of those cups, guys. McDavid has a chance to do something special, and it's pretty cool that this goes back-to-back years here, but like I said, sitting at game 2, watching this Panthers team, that was one of the thoughts going through my brain. I cannot imagine being somebody who has the opportunity to get tickets and watch these two teams just absolutely duke it out here for the Cup.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's going to be a really, really good series. I mean, I don't think if anybody put money down on a sweep, I think they're out of their mind. I think this is going to be as back and forth as you can get. And I mean, Florida in 7 last year, if it's Oilers in 7 this year, it's going to be a hell of a lot of symmetry. And I really would like that. But I mean, the storylines around this, I mean, you've got McDavid, you've got Marchand, you've got Bob looking for another cup. You've got someone in Stuart Skinner who we thought wasn't even going to be a starting NHL goaltender go for a Stanley Cup. And then all the role players on those respective teams, our boy Nico Sturm looking for his second Stanley Cup. So there's just so many storylines for this matchup. And that's the best thing about the NHL is I think no matter what kind of Stanley Cup final we would have gotten, there would have been this many storylines. But I think it's just special that we have this rematch and that we have a chance to see Connor McDavid, one of the greatest talents in the history of the NHL, go up against this juggernaut of a Florida Panthers team looking for a repeat title. So I think just strap in, grab your popcorn, and get ready for a hell of a show.
Yeah, Jake, you're absolutely right. I think this is just great for the sport of hockey. I mean, personally, that's what I think about it. And I remember we talked about this last year, and I think I predicted the Panthers in 6 games, and they won the first 3. I was like, oh, well, I thought this was going to be more of a competition. And then we saw Edmonton really turn things up in those 3 in a row, and obviously Florida takes it in the end. I mean, there's an element of unfinished business here. There's an element of revenge here that's going to play into the narrative. The McDavid thing is going to play into the narrative. I think you mentioned it, Jake. I think Marchand is a great storyline here, too. A guy coming from Boston, obviously, I'm going to think that. But I think Florida, I mean, the depth of scoring that this team has is ridiculous. The number of players with double-digit points is a lot more than what Edmonton's got. You've got players on the back end that are contributing a fair amount. And I think this is just going to be a slugfest. And that's what makes playoff hockey so exciting is that both of these teams got here in some slugfest type series and in the way that they play. And now they have to finish the job. You look at on the Oilers side of things, you got a player in Evan Bouchard that's having a playoff run that's incredible, and he's playing, I'm looking at the stats now, 25 minutes a game in the playoffs is just ridiculous. And that's something where the depth of a team like Florida, they probably don't have to put their guys out there for more than 20 minutes a game because they have so many guys that can do it in the playoffs because they have players that have been doing it for a few straight years in the Cup Finals. So it's going to be really exciting. I'm really anticipating eagerly this game 1, and I think the term set the tone is really important for both teams because Florida can go out there and if they put together a pretty commanding game, you're like, all right, here we go again with this Florida team. The dynasty talks are gonna begin probably after the first period if Florida wins the first period. That's just how the media is. But if Edmonton comes out here, Casey, you mentioned that they're the home team, like that's going to be really, really exciting, I think, especially for hockey in general to see. And I mentioned this last year, but to see the talent of McDavid and Draisaitl on the biggest stage of the sport, that is great for the NHL. And to see it both years with these storylines also kind of swirling around, like this is the NHL. Whoever runs the league is probably licking their chops to see this matchup again. Because McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins with 18 points in 16 games, these are the stars of the league, and they're going against the guys that have been there before, and the guys in Matthew Tkachuk, some antics are going to happen there. So I think all things considered, obviously, me personally, I like to see like new teams get in there and have great seasons and hoist the cup, but I'm okay with this because this is going to be real fun, and it's going to get fun immediately when the puck drops.
Brad Marchand is one of the guys I'm most excited to watch at 37 years old, chasing his second cup. One of my favorite players all around in the NHL, right up there with Brady Tkachuk and Andrei Svechnikov. But the Rat King, the Leaf Killer, leading this team in 17 games, Marchand with 14 points this playoffs. And how about the third line on this Panthers roster? Anton Lundell with 12 points in 17 games. And Eetu Luostarinen at one point was leading the team in points and still up there with 19 assists in the playoffs. So, some pretty outstanding numbers coming off of this third line. But Edmonton's got the depth there as well. And, you think of some guys like Jeff Skinner, Janmark, and Arvidsson, the checking line that they could put together. Podkolzin as a rookie who's really jumped out and jumped onto the scene here. And not to mention the star names up there. If you guys are picking between two top sixes, though, who's taking the advantage? Are you going with the McDavid Draisaitl combo, or the lockdown defense of Barkov with the star-studded, high-hitting Sam Bennett, Matthew Tkachuk, and other names in there like Brad Marchand?
I'm going to roll with Edmonton here, and it's partially anecdotal, narrative-based. McDavid's seen what Florida's going to throw at them before in this scenario, and I think he and Draisaitl are going to be more prepared, at least from the jump here in this series. Especially when you consider what that Barkov and we talked about Marchand and Tkachuk, what they're going to throw at them in terms of operating matchup defense with Barkov and also just the way that they suffocate opposing offenses. I'm just excited to see McDavid out there. I mean, 26 points, 20 assists in 16 games is just video game numbers and probably better than what I would do in NHL, obviously. But I've been getting back into Chell since I've been home, and I've been struggling on All-Star, but that's a different story. But yeah, I think Edmonton is going to have the edge here, and that kind of goes into my prediction, which we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, top six wise, give me the Oilers, especially here in Game 1. I think they're going to show that.
Yeah, I'm gonna be contrarian here, and I'm gonna pick the Panthers. I think depth is very, very important, and the two-way forwards that Florida has, I think it's gonna make a huge difference, especially in those top six battles and in the face-off dot. I think that's really an important point that we've got to look at, especially in this best of 7 series. Whoever controls that face-off dot, especially in the offensive zone and especially on the power play, I think it's going to be a really good indicator to tell how that series is going and what team is going to get more offense going. So I think I trust the center core a little bit more with Florida. I know McDavid's a phenomenal faceoff taker, but I mean, behind him, I don't think any of the bottom six can match up quite as well as Florida's bottom six. So I think sticking with the top six wise, I think I still take the depth of Florida.
Looking at injuries, obviously a key factor in any series. We talked about Zach Hyman and the impact there. Ekholm came back in Game 5. That is a huge piece to Edmonton's blue line returning if he's healthy. Cal Pickard now listed just day-to-day. He should be back should Stuart Skinner need any help, which it does not look like as of lately. Florida, I talked about the importance of their third line. Losterainen and Lundell, as well as Greer off the fourth line, all listed as questionable. Maybe the chance for Nico Sturm to pop in there. I caught up with him after Game 2. Jake sent you the picture. A little extra reason for us to be rooting for Florida. But I want to highlight the goaltending. And again, same question. Who would you rather take here between Sergei Bobrovsky, who's 12-5, a 2.11 goals against average, 912 save percentage, and 3 shutouts, shaky early in the playoffs, but dominant in that conference final, or Stuart Skinner, 6-4, a 2.53 goals against average, 907 save percentage, as well 3 shutouts, and kind of the same narrative, had an 811 save percentage entering the Western Conference Final, now up over 904 now. Which guy are you rolling with? I'll add in Pickard there as well. You could go with the Stuart Skinner-Pickard combo or Sergei Bobrovsky, the big dog.
Oh, give me my favorite mustache in the NHL. Give me Stuart Skinner. I know he had a really shaky early playoffs, but I think he's gotten hot at the right time. And I think the thought of having Pickard on the bench and knowing for Edmonton that you have a serviceable backup that can go out and win you games, I think that's a really big boost to this defense on this team. So I know I just went with Florida's offense, but I think Skinner can do some work against that top 6. So I think he's got hot at the right time. And we always talk about in playoff hockey, the goalie and the team that gets hot at the right time is probably the more dangerous than the juggernauts. So let me see some Stuart Skinner shutouts in this Stanley Cup playoffs, and I'll be a happy man.
Yeah, I think Skinner, I think it's interesting because I'm kind of going to flip flop as well and go Bobrovsky. I think just the playoff acumen there is unparalleled in the series, of course, and looking under the hood, goals saved above expected, above 8 in the playoffs, and obviously 17 games played helps with that compared to Skinner's 2.6. In that category, but Bobrovsky's just making some crazy saves, and there's times where he's put into spots where he has to make an unreal save, and he does exactly that. I wonder, I don't know if this is a bold prediction, but I'll label it as such just for the clickbait and the headlines, obviously. I think we'll see Pickard in this series, and I don't know if that's bold, but I think if he's healthy and maybe you have a weaker start to a game by Skinner, I think Edmonton shouldn't be kind of wary of pulling the trigger and getting Pickard in. We've seen him be successful in this playoff run. Of course, the injury kind of derailed things, but I think if you look at overall the goalie room, Skinner, Pickard, because both of them have been kind of battle tested in the playoffs, it is kind of an advantage for a cup final compared to, if Bobrovsky struggles, that Florida is going to go right back to him.
I'm going to side with Colin there as well, although Skinner seems to love these big moments, just like last year. All of a sudden just became dominant and pretty much guaranteed himself a long-standing contract and spot in the starters crease. Bobrovsky's the proven winner here, and I look back to the Eastern Conference Final. There were multiple times that Carolina could have gotten big-time momentum-shifting goals with a couple of Aho breakaways, power play chances, backdoor feeds that were stopped to keep games 0-0, 1-0, 2-1, where all of a sudden, bang, 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 Florida's winning by 3, 4, 5. Bobrovsky, to me, is the game breaker for Florida, and obviously they're going to need him with the likes of Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, the Bouche bomb from Evan Bouchard. We'll see, but Stuart Skinner, obviously a tough opponent. I'm taking Bobrovsky here, guys. Last one before we get to our predictions. At this point, 3 straight Stanley Cup Final appearances, a championship in 2024, and chasing a second, the 2021-22 President's Trophy winners before getting bounced in the first round. What do the Florida Panthers need to do more for us to consider them a dynasty? Because according to Twitter, they are not yet there.
No, I don't think they're there yet. I don't even think if they win this series, this cup, that they should be labeled a dynasty. I'm sure they will be by, national media or whatever. I think the term dynasty, you know what? This could be old man yells at cloud. I just turned 23, so I'm getting up there in age. I think the term dynasty has lost its meaning a little bit. Yes, they've been very successful for a long period of time, but for me, a dynasty, you got to have rings, plural, and you have to have gotten those rings, over a 5, 7, 8 year stretch, right? So I think if Florida wins this year and they win one or two of the next two Stanley Cups, then we can start labeling them as a dynasty. I don't think this should be a controversial take, honestly. But maybe it is. If they win this year, the word's going to be thrown around, and there should be a term that is lesser longevity than dynasty, but still kind of conveys a similar type of importance. But overall, I'd say you win this year, maybe you lose next year, but you win the year after, you're still a dynasty. Or you win this year, you win next year, you're a dynasty. I think also part of that has to do with part of the definition has to do with the core and the coach, and obviously both of those things are consistent over those years of success. So I can see why the word dynasty is being thrown around here. I'm not irked by the fact that people are saying it. I just don't think it applies just yet. And even if they win this year, I don't think it'll apply to me, at least in my vernacular. I don't think I'm going to start calling them a dynasty.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Colin. One question I would pose to you though is who do you think was the last dynasty in the NHL? Do you think it was the Lightning with like the John Cooper era, or do you think it's even farther back than that?
By his standard, it would have to be Islanders in the 80s.
Yeah, honestly, like I guess the way that I've outlined things, it has to be like even more long-standing than what the Lightning were able to pull off. I don't know. Like I'm kind of thinking about it now. I like three cups in a row or 3 cups in 4 years or whatever it is. Like that sounds like it should be. I don't know. I just keep thinking about the Patriots, man. That's really where my mind goes.
Or like Golden State.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it's weird. The term is kind of like nebulous at this point. But I have to look more into the Lightning. Honestly, I don't think I would. And maybe this is just anti-Florida bias here on my end of things, but yeah, I'd say even no to Tampa.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm thinking of just like fringe teams that media has labeled in there. I mean, Lightning are certainly in there. They could be considered. They could not. I mean, I think of even Sid's Penguins back when he won his first one, 09. I mean, it wasn't too far out of the realm of possibility when they won back-to-back in 16-17. So I think that was like a 7-year period. So that could be considered there. And then, yeah, like Casey said, you get back to the Islanders, you get back to the Oilers with Gretzky. So it's a really interesting conversation to have, and I don't think there is like an objective set of circumstances. I think there definitely is some room for nuance there, but I think I agree with Colin. I think if they win this one, it's definitely the start of one, but that kind of sets the clock going for them. I think if they don't win another one within 2-3 years at the max. So if you had 3 in the last 5-6 years, I think that probably still qualifies. But if you go now and then you wait another 6, 7, 8 years, it gets more into that fringe territory. So I think it's still a hell of a team, and I think they definitely should still be considered a top 5, if not a top 3 team in hockey in the 2020s. So, yeah, interesting to see where they go from here, especially if they win.
Alan Cooper, the 23-year-old old man yelling at the clouds, has given us a standard I don't know is attainable within the salary cap era here, but we'll see. For me, a win here, I'm willing to give it dynasty, and maybe that's just because I've had to watch them knock out the Hurricanes in 2 of the last 3 years. I'm sick of the Florida Panthers. They're a pretty dang good team, but Florida hockey seems to be here to stay. Time for some predictions, gentlemen. On Matthew Mugno is about to join us, and we recorded with AJ Oscarson. That interview coming up next. So we before he had to go, we got his pick. He's going Edmonton in 7 with a McDavid Conn Smythe. Anybody want to oust that one except for myself here? Colin, I'll let you kick us off here with your prediction.
Well, me and Matthew are in lockstep in terms of the Conn Smythe and in terms of the winner. I'll go Oilers in 6. I mentioned last year I said Florida in 6, and I ended up being correct in the winner there. So I'm hoping I can replicate that success on the other end of the spectrum here. I think the Oilers have unfinished business, and I think they're going to finish their unfinished business just like the Panthers did last year after losing the year prior to Vegas. I think the revenge narrative is more than a narrative. It's the reality for Edmonton, and I don't think they're going to let themselves be in a situation where they get beaten by the same team in back-to-back years. That is a side of history you do not want to be on, and I think Edmonton's going to get this one in 6 games.
Yeah, hopefully we're not seeing a Buffalo Bills situation here. No, unfortunately, Casey, I think you're going to be 3-1 outnumbered here. I'm also going with Edmonton in 6. I'm going to switch it up a little bit, though. I think Draisaitl will have a really good Stanley Cup Final, and he's only 1 point behind McDavid right now in the points leaders. So I'm going to say he gets the Conn Smythe. But I mean, you listen to McDavid's speech in Game 7 in the locker room. That's one of my favorite audios I think I've ever heard from behind the scenes NHL. So I really think that they just have that difference to make them that team this year. And I don't think McDavid is going to let this happen for a second year in a row.
Jake's the guy sitting in his car on a Monday morning before he's got to step into the workplace, cranking up the volumes of dig in.
Yep.
I am, man. I'm torn. I'm going to be happy no matter what happens in the Stanley Cup. I'll say that. I have no problem if McDavid's the one lifting it here. The heart, I have the feeling the hockey gods are behind the Edmonton Oilers, and seeing McDavid get it done. I mentioned the stats there. Other than the Canadiens back in the 60s and early 70s, the last 2 times that a couple of teams have gone back-to-back opponents, it is reversed, which would be in favor of the Oilers. I want the Florida Panthers, though, and I'm going to go with Florida in 7, doing it on the road. I think Bobrovsky has to be the Conn Smythe. As I said, he's the big dog that's got to get it done. He has to lock down these top guys. I like the defensive structure of the Florida Panthers, and I think that's where they can extend the weakness on Edmonton, where Florida plays kind of a defensively structured game, but also kind of that dump and chase, dump and forecheck. I think they can exploit some of the issues on Edmonton's blue line. Ekholm coming back is a big factor that would go against that. But I like the way that Florida can roll their lines. They need the big dogs to be better than they have been, though. Matthew Tkachuk is kind of just getting going. He was very strong in the Eastern Conference Final. Pretty unnoticeable, though, in the first 2 rounds. Barkov has got to be better as well. Those guys need to make more of it can't just come from that third line, but I want to see Nico Sturm's name back in the cup. I want to see Brad Marchand picking rats off the ice in Edmonton, having them take slap shots as he walks off and a Stanley Cup celebration. We'll wait and see. I'm outnumbered, but I'm going to take Florida here, guys. Any last thoughts here? We've got our interview upcoming. AJ Oscarson, maybe the only guy who truly knows the Gabe Landeskog story better than Landeskog and his family. Unbelievable interview with him. Matthew Mugno will be hopping on. When we come back, some PWHL talk. Jake will hang around, but Colin, this seems to be it for you here. You'll be on with us as well when this interview kind of runs around. We recorded it in opposite order, but welcome back. What's going on for the next week? It sounds like we're going to have you to stay for a little while.
Absolutely. I'm stoked to be back. It'll be a fun breakdown for the cup, and I'm excited for the listeners right now that are gonna be able to experience this interview that we just recorded. It was very, very impactful to watch the Landeskog documentary, and as a sports storyteller myself, Casey, Jake, I'm sure you guys can kind of relate to this, seeing the way that this was made, and I think the very first thing, the first question that AJ answers, you're going to get so much insight into how much he cares about this, and how much we should care about it too. Like it's really, really cool, and I'm excited to listen back to it, and I'm excited for you all to listen to it as well.
AJ Oscarson is up next. Jake and I will return after that to break down the PWHL championship in the upcoming offseason. But a big shout out to Colin Kapoor and a big welcome back, buddy. AJ Oscarson, again, the producer of A Clean Sheet, up next. You're listening to the Fifth Liners Hockey Podcast. Back in a moment. It is our pleasure, ahead of them winning an upcoming Emmy, hopefully, to welcome on AJ Oscarson, the lead producer from A Clean Sheet, the 6-part documentary series following Gabe Landeskog over the past 2 seasons as he works through the radical knee injury that caused all kinds of physical and mental health problems. AJ has been there since the start, and through the use of personal home videos and Gabe's journals, A Clean Sheet pulls back the curtain on a novel return to the ice that we just saw here in this Stanley Cup playoffs. AJ, the director, writer, and editor, did all of the filming, the audio, and the project to keep the footprint as small as possible. But a lot of excitement here as the finale is upcoming. It's been airing on TNT, streaming on Max, and on June 9th, the finale will be ahead of us, and they are now starting an Emmy campaign. AJ, let's start with a welcome aboard here. First, tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, thank you so much for coming on with us. We're very excited to get into the details with you.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. It's a fun show y'all have. So yeah, stoked to come on. Bit about me. I work for Fresh Tape Media. We are a Denver and New York based production company focused mostly in the sports and commercial doc space. So clients like NHL, MLB, NBA, Microsoft, kind of all over the place. And I've been there 4 years, and about half that time I've spent very intently on this project.
Talk us through the stages before this show was announced, how the project came to you and kind of came alive.
Yeah, we have a producer out of New York, Avalanche Captain, who saw the photo Gabe posted to Instagram right after the surgery with his knee in the brace, and just sent a quick DM of, hey, we're all pulling for you. We had worked with the Avalanche and Gabe on a couple commercials, and we do a lot of in-arena stuff for the Nuggets and Avs. So we knew him, he knew us, and he just kind of wrote back. He's like, oh, if you ever want to tell the story, let me know. And that flight, he was on his way to Arizona that we cover in the first episode. And then we weren't there in Arizona, but then he flew to Philadelphia to start the rehab process with Bill Knowles there, of a professional that, I think a lot of athletes have gone to. He's very popular. And I showed up there with, at the time, it was supposed to be 2 cameras and an audio operator. And then we did that for, I think, a day and a half. And at the end of that second day, he was like, no. And he's like, if we can get it down to 1 camera and no audio, I'm more comfortable. But it's too much. When we sat in his, he had a short-term apartment in Philly while he was there, because, 4 or 6 weeks at a time. And he's like, the way we want to tell the story is not a traditional recovery documentary where, guy gets injured, guy works out really hard, we do a Rocky montage, and then he's better. He really wanted to show the personal side of it and the effect on his family and his wife and the more mental side of it. And to do that, we knew we had to get the camera in the home. He's got 2 young kids. And he's like, I don't want a crew around my kids. It's just too much, which is, very logical. So we just trimmed it down to, he'd wear a lavalier microphone and and that was it. And I would just hand hold the camera, just like this, and just kind of walk around. And then we did that for 2 years.
We've got Matthew Mugno, Jake Swanson, and the anticipated return of Colin Kapoor here, and they've got some deep questions ready to dig in with you here. Jake, if you want to take it off, and we can just rotate around here.
Yeah, sure. And AJ, I mean, following around an NHL player, especially to the caliber of Gabriel Landeskog for 2 years, must have been a really fun opportunity, and getting to know him. And I just kind of wanted to know, like, basics. What was it like working with him behind the scenes? And like, we've seen all the things in the press and his public appearances, but what's he like behind the curtain?
Yeah, I've had a few people ask me that question of like, oh, like what's the tea, or what's it really like? And it's like, I sat with him. We've days. I mean, I think we were at like maybe 40 or 50 filming days on his project, just filming. That doesn't count travel and sitting around at airports and things like that. And then I'd sat and read his personal journals that he's kept over the past 3 or 4 years. And yeah, I mean, I think the person we all know from the headlines and the press conferences and stuff, like, I think he's just actually that person, like his journals, it's like every third or fourth page, he's talking about how much he loves his wife. And then every other page, he's talking about how much he loves his kids. And then every other page, he's talking about how much he loves hockey. He's just like a very genuine person. I think he's very funny. I don't know if a lot of folks see that side of it, but I think he still has a little bit of pause, because he's really conscious that English he still considered it his second language, even though I think most people would never know he's from Sweden. Yeah. But yeah, very, very funny. I think it's really impressive how present he is. Like, I've been with him in like press scrums in the locker room or at the Eagles games and all these types of events and stuff. And he'll just sit and listen to folks. Even though there's all this noise around him and his phone's going off all the time, he's just a very present person. And I think that's why, he has elevated himself to the position he is in the team and in the league.
Yeah, build off that. Jake, great question about, what's it actually like to get to know Gabe and establish that relationship. Now, as I mentioned, I've done some of these projects at a very low level with athletes, and it can be hard to access a subject. What was the key in this project to not only gaining that access to Gabe, but ensuring that you're getting the right relationship going for a 50-day shoot?
That's a great question. Wow. Yeah, it's a question of somebody who's definitely done these types of things before. Like rapport and access is tricky. I think when we started, we were very conscious of we really didn't know what we were making for a long time. We had an idea of where we wanted it to go, but it's a documentary, and like, who knew? Like, the surgery is kind of insane and all that. The big thing we discussed very, very early on was, I'm going to be the only camera op you'll see, whether it's Philly, Denver, he's got family in Toronto, the doc is in Chicago. So we're kind of all over the place. And like, that was one of the promises we made as Fresh Tape Media is AJ is your guy. You won't see another camera operator, wherever we need to be, we'll be. And then the second layer was, I'm the only one who's going to watch this footage. Like, I put it in a secure part of our server, so like other folks, even within our company, couldn't see our conversations. And that was kind of like give me 3 months, give me 6 months. You can say whatever you want to the camera. I'm the only person who will ever see it. And if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel like the right vibe, I'll just delete it or put it on a drive and give it to you, and you can do whatever you want with it. But like, only one person in the world will see it until you say otherwise. And kind of to this day, I'm still the only person who's seen all of the footage. Other folks have seen cuts and drafts and stuff, and I think that helped quite a bit. I think if you're in front of the lens, you're a bit self-conscious as to like, what is this person going to do with my words? You see, I think now we all see reality in doc work where you can kind of make people say almost whatever you want with the right editing, and just prove like that's not what we're trying to make. And then also, if we wanted to go to that personal space, he had to be able to be a bit more free of conscious and free form with it. And he's just thinking about AJ, the guy he knows, and not other producers or other editors who might be around. What are they going to think? Are they going to view it out of context? Nope. I shoot it. I write it. I edit it. I'm the only one who sees the raw kind of inputs. And that helps. And then, quite honestly, we didn't really talk about sports all that much, which was a kind of a conscious thing. It's like when I was around, we would talk about the family. How was his mental health? How is he feeling today? What's it like, during the various points of like season starting, now it's all-star game and now it's playoffs are starting and you're missing that. Like, what are your moods and emotions around that? It was like less so of like, oh, what do you think of like Connor McDavid's season, or anything like that. Is we try to keep it very not hockey focused. Obviously, hockey is imbued in his entire life, so it comes up, but that was also kind of a conscious effort. And I think that kind of laid the base of like, hey, when I'm here, this is what we're going to kind of do, and this is our space, which helped a lot.
And that's a great segue, AJ, into one of the more emotional moments of the entire thing, which was the Avs home opener. Obviously, given what you've just said, you're there at the arena kind of shooting that intimate moment. And when you're in a spot like that, my read on it was that us seeing his reaction was built on months and months or years even of trust built between yourself and this individual. So I'm curious, when you're in that moment as the filmmaker, what was it like capturing that? I mean, it's a vulnerable state, it's an intimate state, and obviously it is augmented by the production part of it, of his voiceover and his retelling, but you're also there and we're seeing this in real time. So what was that like for you to capture that footage and to be, I think, the one person there maybe for him in that moment?
Yeah, that was, I think, a really pivotal component in our project overall, right? We had talked about home opener, and he had been really hopeful about home opener over that summer. Had a bit of a setback, but I think probably like a lot of folks, either hockey fans, Avs fans, people at Ball Arena that night, I think we were probably all of the same mind of like, boy, it was going to be so great for Gabe. Of like, he's going to walk out. Granted, he's in a suit, but like, he's very beloved in this town. You could hear the chants and everything. I was like, boy, this must be a great moment for Gabe of like kind of toiling in the shadows and is working. So I see how hard he works all day, every day, and to like still get this reception must be so amazing. And then to see him kind of go back into this hallway behind the locker room and turn out that was not the case at all. Nothing against the fans. He absolutely adores the Avalanche fan base and being in Ball Arena. It was just, he feels like he's letting those people down. And I was like, I never even had that thought. So like when he walked off the bench, I kind of followed with him, just of like, that's just what I'm accustomed to doing, of like, I'm just his shadow at this point. And we're just kind of like blown away. And I didn't really know what to do. And I think we turned it down in the audio mix, but there are some like security guards and officers around, kind of in that locker room area. Once they started figuring out, they kind of start backing up. So you can kind of hear people chatter. And then, that was the night McKinnon got the Hart and Lindsay trophy. So you see those kind of walk by as well. And everybody starts to figure out what's going on. And everyone starts to like back away. And I can just hear everyone behind me getting further and further away and kind of going into different doors and stuff like that, to the point where there's no one around. And that was to my cue to like, okay, well, now I should get closer. And it was really, honestly, a bit awkward of like, I don't know if I should be doing this, even how much we've worked together and everything. And yeah, so I filmed that, and then he did a workout during the game, and then I left. That was it. I filmed for 25 minutes that day, the entire day. But yeah, I went back and I watched the footage at home, and I drove to his place Sunday morning. The event was Saturday night. Went there Sunday morning, and I was like, hey, we should talk about this. Like, obviously I was there. I captured it. I'm the only one who knows it exists. I can get rid of it if you want, but I think if I keep it, we've got to use it. And, he was very candid, and he was like, last night I was not happy you were there, seeing the red light of the camera and everything. But he's like, I think we should keep it because it's it's true, it's accurate, it's part of the story. Like, this was the point of, it's not a linear thing of like injury, recovery, I'm going to be back. It has these ups and downs, and he's like, that's the whole part of it. And ultimately, I think we were happy it was able to be captured. But yeah, it was definitely like a bit touch and go. But I think it's really important for folks to see that it's an emotional and physical push to go from injury to recovery, or just even injury. Dealing with chronic pain and things like that takes its toll mentally and physically.
Obviously, there's a ton of emotions around any award-winning documentary, and this is a big one, highlighting mental health around athletics, which is something that is more of a recent trend in showing light on, because a lot of times it was athletes trying to cover that up. Now it's becoming a little bit more normalized, but this is something that has an opportunity to really, break waves in that aspect. First, talk a little bit about, working around the emotions. You highlighted it right there, but as you guys prepare for this Emmy campaign, what that opportunity really means to you to be kind of a groundbreaking set on that campaign.
Yeah, I mean, we feel very fortunate. I think just as a production company, I think all of us on this call are a bit in the media in some way, right? And want to tell stories and want probably to tell personal stories and get like what's actually going on inside an athlete's head, right? And so we've got a great opportunity as Fresh Tape to be able to tell this story. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I've been doing this a long time. And this is definitely just like a project of a lifetime of, Gabe doesn't really have to do any of what he's been doing over this project. And to kind of see the impact, people have been sending him DMs through Instagram or Twitter and all these types of things through the Avalanche, kind of network, saying, oh, I've got chronic pain, and it's nice to see that there can be a light at the end of the tunnel. Or I've been dealing with this. So like I started journaling too, just to like get it out of my head. There was a woman who got like one of his journal entries tattooed on her forearm as just like a motivation to kind of keep moving. And I think that's one of his big things, right? Is like, you can be in your emotions. You can have a bad day, you can have a good day, just like a home opener. At the end of the day, you just got to keep moving and just not dwell. You can visit those places, but don't live there. And I think that's simple, but really powerful and also really difficult, easier said than done, but I think he's proven that he's done well at it.
Yeah, and keeping on with the humanizing athletes trend as well. Again, like Casey said, there's been a push to kind of just show the full picture of these athletes that we kind of put up on a pedestal, and sometimes we don't even see them as humans. So we've seen that in the Netflix documentaries and quarterback and receiver, highlighting a lot of NFL players. And then most recently for the MLB side, we've seen the Boston Red Sox inside the dugout. And one of the biggest storylines there was Jarren Duran and his struggle with mental health. So in terms of humanizing Gabe as a player and as a person, what do you think was the most kind of surprising thing to you, coming from an outside perspective of talking about him as just a full person instead of just someone we see on our TV every day?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one of the things I probably knew before going in, but I don't think we had really any insight into, is his kind of role as a father. He loves his children so much. I think he's a great family man. I think his quote has been, I'm a family man who plays hockey, not a hockey player with a family. And to see him interact with his kids, who are both still pretty young. Linnea, I think, is coming up in 4 or 5. Luke's 3. But how much motivation he derives from his kids. When they won the Stanley Cup, Linnea was quite small. Luke, I think, was like a year and a half, maybe. So doesn't really remember it. And, he talks in the show of, his dad was a pro in the Swedish leagues and national leagues and stuff. but retired before Gabe could see him play. And he's like, I always want, like, how cool would that have been? And he wants to do the same for his kids who were kind of too young when his injury kind of sidelined him for a bit. And I think a huge motivation for him has been being able to see his kids see him play hockey, and how focused he is on that, and how central that is to I think his physical and mental recovery of, like, you know, we mic'd him up on his return back right for the playoffs. I put a microphone on him, and Luke was able to come to practice, and, like, on the bench, and they're doing scrimmages, and, like, I'm just listening to him, and, like, you know, someone would get up and do a line. He moved down. He's like, I see Luke over there. See Luke, you know, you need to go wave to him, you know. And, like, he goes on the next side. He's like, hey, EJ, do you see Luke over there? You know, and he goes, hey, Nate, you see Luke down there? And it just makes me really happy to see the blend of hockey and family. You know, in my head, like, I grew up watching 1980s and 90s hockey, you know, and it was like bruisers and really physical and, like, just tough guys. And Gabe is undoubtedly a big and tough guy, right? But to see him being on a hockey bench with his boys and still just being, like, gushing over his little kids and, like, oh, isn't this so great that they're here? And isn't this so fun and everything, is like, that's just amazing. Like, I just don't know if we see that all that much in hockey. But like you say, that is changing, and I hope to see more of it.
Now, we've talked a lot about some of the emotional aspects of this, and I could ask you a million questions, but I have to ask the nerd question, because the worst seat to be in is the cold-blooded cutting room floor. So you said you were very open to answering any questions. Was there anything that was left on the cutting room floor for the final cut that just didn't work? There are those situations where, like, oh, the audio wasn't great, the picture wasn't great, or I don't know how to fit this into the story. Was there anything that you still think about that's on the server that you're like, I really wish that worked?
Yeah, that is a great question. Yeah, there was a scene. I say that as a little written, you know, a moment. You know, we were in Calgary over this past summer that we cover in episode 4. He's staying at Cale Makar's house. And Cale had gone, you know, to be with his mother-in-law, I think, or help. You're, like, doing something innately, Cale, of, like, I'm going to go help do some yard work or something. Like, I'm going to go mow my mother-in-law's lawn or something like that. Like, that's okay. And, you know, it's just like, that is the nicest thing. And the only really shot I used of it was Gabe went swimming in the river and then walked out. And I used that shot in the final kind of mix. But then we sat at the back of Cale's house, just on the patio, just the two of us. And we just kind of talked for, it must have been a bit more than an hour. And it started off like, he's like, oh, let's not get deep. Let's just kind of, like, hang out in the sun. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to do that, you know? And that was, like, minute 1. And by minute 45, you know, he was talking about, you know, he was starting to get really worried that he was letting down the fans, but then, you know, he was worried he was going to be letting down Mel or the kids in some way, you know, who I don't know if he ever could, you know, everyone's so supportive. But that, you know, his fear was just, could be a big problem of, like, he had kind of almost gotten to the point of, like, I'm not sure if this is going to happen. He'd start talking about, like, for the first time of, like, acknowledging, like, and said the word retirement, which is not something I'd seen, you know, in person or read in his journal or anything. It's like, that is just not on the table. And then come August, you know, in the setback, it was like you know, I gotta start thinking about what career 2.0 is. And he was just really worried about the impact it would have on his family and the team and everything. The impact it would have on basically everyone else but him, which I thought was just really amazing. And then we got to the edit, and, you know, the tough thing about TV is you are going to deliver a 24-minute, 30-second piece to the second, you know, and those limitations are tough. And you have to work in 2 commercial breaks, you know, and they have to be between the 7 and 8.5 minute mark. So, like, you can't start an idea and then go to a commercial for 3 minutes and expect the audience to come back. So it puts you in a tight spot, right? And we talked about that sequence. And finally, I was like, I think we just cut it, because we wanted to make sure there was enough time for people to really get, because right after that sequence is a commercial, and then after we come back from the break is that home opener. And I thought it was more important that people have more context for what was happening at home opener. You know, he wasn't having a hard time because he was missing, like he wasn't playing. It was this kind of culmination of everything, which everything that we'd kind of talked about at Kale's House had kind of funneled into that. And so we just kind of put it there, but like still some of the like, it's just really powerful footage that like somehow in 6 episodes of TV, you still don't have time.
And you talk about powerful footage, and for me personally, is a very impactful piece of sports storytelling, what I've seen so far on streaming. And I think there's obviously a deeper message in the documentary, aside from this is an injury, this is the telling of what happened and the progress thereof. So for you at the storytelling level, and then obviously Gabe at the executive producer level, his kind of say-so level, what did you guys want the viewers to take away from the documentary, from his story, and how did that come about? Was it something that you knew going in, or did that vision evolve over the course of filming?
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say all of that. You know, when I went to Philly the first time, we went to the courtyard of, it's one of these big apartment complexes, go to the courtyard before he went to the gym. He was still on crutches at the time. And he's like, come out to Philly and we'll just see what we see. And I found I just put my camera on a table next to me just so like I could make a transcript of it. It's all out of focus and everything. So I didn't use any of it, but we were kind of like, he didn't really know me. And I obviously don't really know him at a personal level. He knew I was part of Fresh Tape and he'd seen me run a camera and all of that. But he was kind of, I think, feeling me out of like, what kind of thing are you trying to make? And I'm trying to feel him out of like, what are you trying to make? Both of us not really saying of like, we don't want to make one of those projects that's just a bunch of clips of somebody working out and then gets better. He's like, yeah, I really wanted to kind of delve into this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, by the end of the 45 minutes, we were both like, oh, great, me too. What level that went to, we weren't really sure, or what that threshold might be, we weren't really sure. I knew the journals existed and he would talk about them, but like I never asked to see them or anything. And it wasn't until maybe like 6 or 7 months ago, he was like, just got to the point where like it'd just be easier if we just read them together and like actually break this thing down and see what we have at another level. And that's when like, the title, like A Clean Sheet, came to the fore, because it's, he's always turning over a clean sheet of ice, after the Zamboni and stuff like that. And then it just kind of progressed, where we kind of realized we were treating the camera as a video version of his journal anyway. Something would happen and I would just ask and he would just talk, and I would just kind of keep asking, the same way like he was putting thoughts in his journal. So there ended up being a lot of parallels between what we had captured and what he was putting down just for himself. And I thought it was just absolutely amazing that he would open that up to everyone. Like I can't imagine giving my personal journals to somebody and be like, just go for it. And then you tell me what you want to put on HBO. I was like, okay. But yeah, he just really wanted it to have that level of proximity to his personal side of things.
The series finale is coming up on June 9th. What are you most excited about, and what do you want fans to expect and fans to be most excited about as we get ready for this release?
Yeah, I think, I'm a big hockey fan, Avs fan, and I think when I see people come back after injury, I'm always so curious as like, what does it really take and what is it really like? So we do like the conditioning stint in episode 5 is the conditioning stint at the Colorado Eagles up in Loveland, maybe like 45 minutes, an hour north of here. So we kind of dive into that. But then it's like the camera just follows Gabe, the day before the road trip to Dallas with his family, of the nerves are right there. Like he's going to go like he'd been on the road before with the boys here and there, but like never with the intent of playing. Maybe like skating and getting some drills and stuff, but like game jersey on type of thing. Didn't end up playing, and we didn't know that at the time. But then we go to Dallas with him and follow him for a couple days in Dallas, and I'm like right there with him, and I'm like, oh, this tweet says you're playing tonight. Are you playing tonight? And he's like, I don't know where they get that information, and like kind of just go like blow for blow of that. I guess it was like a Monday to Thursday or something like that of just about every day, and then start at 6:30 in the morning at his house the day of Game 3, and just is there. I think we filmed. Well, he was playing the game. You didn't film. We weren't filming together, but I was kind of like in his pocket from like 6:30 in the morning until almost 2 in the morning the next day. And yeah, so I hope what fans see is what it really looks like to come back. Again, not working out or how do you get into shape, but like the nerves. Again, like he just doesn't want to let folks down. He really wants to perform. He wants to be with a team and to be that person. And we try to explore that a bit in episode 6. And I think, I've been editing it the entire up until just now. And I hope it's really fun. And I hope what we're trying to evoke is, I was obviously in the building. There were 19,500 other people in the building. I don't know how many people were watching on television, but the vibe was electric. It was just buzzing. You could be in the basement press box and you would hear people chanting and stomping their feet and everything. And it was just wild. And knowing what that meant to Gabe, having been there for so long. So hopefully we can replicate that energy for folks who weren't able to be in the building of like, maybe this is a bit what it was like.
AJ, we're very grateful for you and for Christina for reaching out to let us use our platform for you to tell your story. I know all 4 of us are going to have the Kleenex ready, and I'm sure it's going to be even more emotional for you as the finale comes out. A Clean Sheet, episode 6 airs on TNT and streams on Max June 9th. AJ, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And again, we are beyond excited to watch it with everybody coming up in a couple days.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It's been really fun. You guys are all great. Looking forward to it.
Jake remains the last one alive on the island here, and we close off episode 31 with some PWHL news. A dominant showing by the Clarkson Golden Knights in the final, and Brooke McQuigg and Dominique Petrie on our side in the green and gold have lifted the trophy. Jake, Stephanie Markowski, our former friend of the show and guest from a couple episodes ago, was on the losing side, unfortunately, for Ottawa, but a lot of fun to watch there. Hit us with it. You're the leader. Drive the train, buddy.
All right. Yeah, so Minnesota going back-to-back in the Walter Cup Finals, and well-deserved. I mean, they played a great series, and hopefully Steph can take this loss a little bit easier with the Edmonton Oilers, her favorite team, her hometown team, in the Stanley Cup Finals that we just talked about. So fingers crossed for her that they come through so she has something to celebrate this offseason. But yeah, I mean, Minnesota, man, they are a force to be reckoned with. And Casey, are we talking about a Canada curse already for the PWHL? It's only been 2 seasons, but Minnesota taking it home for the US of A in both of those. So I think it's a testament to this Minnesota Frost team and also their coaching staff. I mean, both years they've been in that last playoff spot, and they've gotten chosen one year, gotten passed over the next year, and you can't win. They win out every time. So it's an interesting dilemma to have if you're facing Minnesota in that first round. It's a tough one. And then Ottawa coming in to this game, or to this series, trying to knock off the defending champs and not being able to. But it was a really good series. Minnesota won it in 2-1 in an overtime game too as well. So 4-game series, could have gone to 5 if it went the other way, but yeah, really, really exciting. And they got to do it at home. So huge congrats to the Minnesota organization. They did a phenomenal job. And I think they're going to be a huge force to be reckoned with the rest of their tenure in the PWHL. But yeah, I don't know, Casey, did you catch any of the games, or was it more just the final scores?
I watched the last game was the only one I caught, but I've got my eyes on a new piece for the wall behind me at home and a little bit of flavor in the color on the championship jerseys. How cool is this? Of the 6 named pick, number 3 was one of them in Brooke McQuigg's jersey. So someone we'll definitely have on the show coming up this summer. But from a personal note, how it is, having a close relationship in the industry we work in. It's pretty dang cool to see your friends' names being promoted on championship jerseys. Something we talked about the last time we ran through the preview highlighting this matchup, Jake, was depth. That's something that stood out to you. Obviously, Minnesota had the better of the depth, but both of these teams maybe in certain ways lacking the star-studded talent, the star names, but obviously getting it done over the opposition on other sides around the PWHL.
Yeah, and I mean, we knew that Montreal and Toronto had a lot of that high-end talent. Like, for example, Marie-Philippe Poulin and the Victoire. I mean, she's one of the faces of women's hockey, if not the face. And over in Toronto, you have a lot of different people, like Sarah Nurse is a huge name, huge household name, and a couple other players on both teams. So it was interesting to see that both of the Minnesota and Ottawa teams, where yes, Minnesota has Taylor Heisey, has Kendall Coyne Schofield, but a lot of the top end talent was around the league differently. Also, New York and Boston had some talent as well, and it was interesting to see who stepped up. I know we talked earlier in the show about Edmonton needing a next man up after their injury troubles, and that's exactly what happened with Minnesota and Ottawa. They had a lot of depth, and something we're used to seeing, Casey, you and I on the Clarkson side. So many of those women's teams had so many different point scorers in their games, and that's exactly what happened here with Minnesota and Ottawa. Looking at the final playoff stats for Minnesota, Lee Steckline gets the nod for the most playoff points, 8 points in 8 games played, an even split, 4 goals and 4 assists. And her partner on the blue line, Sophie Jakes, also 7 points, tied with Taylor Heisey. Those two are tied for second there. And then Claire Thompson rounding out the top 4 as they're tied, but she had 6 points in 8 games. So it was interesting. And I mean, you go all the way down, even to our friend Brooke McQuigg, she had 3 points in 8 games. And Dom Petrie had a point in 7 games. So there was only 8 skaters on that lineup that didn't have a point, and 2 of those were goaltenders. So really 6 players out of that entire lineup didn't have a point. So it really speaks to Minnesota's depth, how many players can get on the score sheet and provide. And on Ottawa's side, it was much of the same. Emily Clark, 5 points in 8 games played. Jocelyn Rock, 4 points. Teresa Vashanova, 4 points. So a lot of players on that team having a chance to impact the game. And I think that's exactly the identity that Minnesota wants going forward. So look for that in the draft, especially coming up, the prospect drafts, what they're looking for, a lot of pieces to complement what they already have. So other storyline that we have is a Connor McDavid situation from last year, where the playoff MVP goes to the losing team in Ottawa. Gwyneth Phillips, the goaltender for the Charge, gets the Ilana Kloss playoff MVP award. She led all goaltenders with a 1.23 goals against average and a 9.52 save percentage through 8 playoff starts. She was fantastic for Ottawa, and Ottawa's definitely found their franchise goaltender. And Casey, with the goaltending, something I talk a lot about, but something in your mind, what stood out to you when you watched that final game, that game 4 between the 2 goaltenders of Minnesota and Ottawa?
I think it's something that we talked about all season round, and it's interesting that it doesn't go the other way as well in my mind, because for the Frost, that was kind of the thing we talked about last episode, being what they needed to clinch the series was goaltending, and goaltending being good enough. And it's kind of ironic they win it and the trophy goes the other way. But obviously a well-deserved winner there in Gwyneth Phillips. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit baffling to me that it wouldn't go somewhere in the Frost, but obviously Phillips was a key factor to the success, and those MVP trophies are playoff MVPs, so it's not just in the finals. In a big piece of Ottawa pulling the upset to get to the championship there. Also interesting that both competitors in the championship were the lower seeds. Neither of the top seeds made it in there.
Yeah, and it was definitely a well-deserved win for the Frost. But again, Ottawa has a lot to build on for next season. And I think even the rest of the teams in the league, with the addition of Seattle and Vancouver next year, there's going to be 2 more teams fighting for those playoff spots. And now it's going to be half the league instead of 2 teams that are not going to get into the playoffs. So interesting there. But now actually kind of fitting last topic here that I'll say about the series, Minnesota's dynasty, quote unquote. And we just talked about with our friend Colin Kapoor of what defines a dynasty. And
definitely a lot more than what we've seen.
Yeah, apparently. And I don't know if he'd give Minnesota their dynasty, even though it's been 2 for 2 in the history of the PWHL. But it definitely speaks to, I think, the coaching of this team and head coach Ken Klee. I like the quote he had here, and I'll quote it here. Open quote, "To win in front of our fans, to have over 10,000 come to the Xcel Energy Center on a holiday and support our players is just outstanding. It was amazing, even with Gwyneth Phillips winning MVP and all them cheering for her. It just shows how great a fan base we have, how much class they have, how much they love the game, and how much they love watching the players compete," end quote. And I mean, Ken Klee, he is a very, very good coach, and I think Minnesota is very lucky to have him. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an extension in the works here for the upcoming offseason. And I think Minnesota, they will have these core pieces, and they will keep winning playoff games. So who knows? Maybe next year we come back, they're on the heels of a three-peat, and we are calling them a dynasty. So I'm very excited for the Minnesota Frost and what they've done. So congrats to them. I think it's been a heck of a season in Ottawa as well. I think they've done a great job. So very excited going into this offseason. There's a lot of big news coming out. And the first big news we're going to talk about is the expansion draft. So the expansion draft is coming up. I believe it's June 9th is the date. And we've gotten some interesting tidbits of information now. There's been a couple of reports coming out here and there about protecting players. I think the list I think has to be in by June 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. And it's going to be interesting to see. Teams only get 3 players to protect, so they have the
Which is
rest.
much different than the NHL and what we've seen in the recent expansions as well, and makes it a lot more room for big name players going all over.
Yeah. And so the timeline, yes. So June 3rd at noon is the deadline to protect 3 players from selection for the exclusive signing window or the expansion draft. And the exclusive signing window, which is basically where the 2 teams can sign RFAs, that opens June 4th at 9 a.m. and closes June 8th at 5 p.m. So couple of different reports coming out. The biggest one is that Hillary Knight, the captain of the Boston Fleet, will not be protected in favor of protecting Alina Mueller. So big news for Boston and Captain America there in Hillary Knight not being protected. And Casey, your initial thoughts on hearing that?
Is it crazy to say that I don't disagree with it? I think Mueller has shown to be one of those prospects to be the future of a player like a Hillary Knight. Maybe not to the star caliber Knight, obviously a forward scoring goals, but Mueller was such a big piece of a lot of those NCAA championships at Northeastern and those big runs that they went on. I think Hillary Knight is kind of on the closing edge of her career. She just announced that her last Olympics is going to be next winter. She said she wants to continue with the PWHL after that, but that kind of signals she's ready to wrap it up, ready to hang up the skates. So I don't disagree with that. I also think we're seeing a movement in even in Hockey Canada, players like Jamie Lee Rattray not on the World's roster this year. Some of those players that have been there for a decade, where now the youth movement, those college players, this year's draft is going to be loaded with talent, not to mention what's coming the year after out of women's college hockey in next year's senior class that is still to be drafted. I think as a general manager, if I was in that seat, I would be going more youth. If I'm Ottawa, it's Danielle Serdachny. If I'm Minnesota, the more younger players that are on their early contracts, but protecting those players that could be the face of your franchise for another decade to come, rather than the Kendall Coyne Schofields, who just won with Minnesota back-to-back years. But again, a player that's kind of on the back half, maybe has 4 years probably is a stretch, 3-4 years left in her career. I'd rather go with a player that could be there. You can sign them now on a long-term deal to really be the face of your franchise looking forward.
Yeah, and that is the question as well for this expansion draft and in the strategies. Do you go youth or do you go experience? And I mean, all of the armchair GMs that have done an expansion draft in the various sports games, especially like NHL, you face that question to a lesser extent, but it's a real question in the real world. Do you protect these experienced players who know what it means to win on the world stage, who know what it means to win in the league stage, or do you go with youth and someone that can be there for 6, 7, 8 years of your franchise? So it's going to be interesting to see when the protected lists come out. Of course, we'll cover that when they do come out, but I will be interested to see who gets protected, who gets left off, and who doesn't get a contract as well. There are some RFAs that might go to Seattle and Vancouver just via the exclusive signing window and think they have a better shot to make that team with more playing time than stay with their current organization. So interesting to see, and I think we're both very excited for the expansion draft. And then one that's really going to hit home for Casey in his last senior class that went out as graduates at Clarkson University, and Haley Wynn, Nicole Gosling getting ready for the prospect draft in 2025. And that one is going to be, like Casey said, star-studded. That's going to be June 24th at 7 p.m., and it's going to be a lot of different things. So New York Sirens have the first pick, as they did last year. They selected Claire Thompson with that one. And, I'm sorry.
Sarah Fillier.
Sarah Fillier. That is my bad. I was looking at Claire
Different
Thompson.
Princeton Tiger.
Yeah.
Thompson won it on the frost there.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Another first rounder, though. You're close.
Yes, exactly. So, Sirens get another chance at a number 1 overall pick, and they're just stockpiling talent there over in New York. And there's some really notable names going up, and I just looked up the first top 20 prospects of the 2025 PWHL draft, and 2 of the names up there are Clarkson Golden Knights and Haley Wynn and Nicole Gosling back-to-back at 4 and 5. This list is a little outdated just because both Abby Murphy and Casey O'Brien are going back to college to complete their final year. But the number 2 name is a name that we know and hate, Casey. It's Kalti Kaltinkova of Colgate University and Czechia. She is one of the most physical forwards you will ever see in the women's game, and that is exactly what the PWHL needs right now, and especially with hits being more legal than they have been in the past, and that physical presence really a necessity now for the pro women's game. So Kalti Kaltinkova gets up there. We also see the likes of Rory Gilday from Cornell. We see Ann Trukowski from Clarkson, Kendall Cooper from Quinnipiac, Abby Hustler from St. Lawrence, and the names just go on and on and on. So, Casey, in your opinion, do you see Kaltenkova going first overall to the Sirens, or do you see them going with one of the green and gold girls?
I don't think there's a bad answer there, whether it's I like Haley Wynn up front, but Kaltenkova as well. I think I can't say that I've versed myself well enough to know, what New York needs. I didn't catch many of their games other than highlights watching through the Golden Knights players and their star studded talent. But I would think, Ella Shelton's probably got to be one of the faces going forward in the blue line in New York. I think Kaltenkova is built for this league, though. It's hard. If I was a general manager, that's a name that is right up there on my list. But yeah, it kind of depends on what you need, and same thing with any of those expansion teams, what they're able to pull out of this expansion draft. I don't think you can go wrong, whether it's a Win, Kaltenkova, even if you're a little farther down the list. Some of those names that you rattled off there, with Gosling, I also like Ann Trukowski. I think she could add well to the depth of a team playing a top six role. We've seen what she can do at Clarkson. So I'm planning on being there in person on that June 24th draft. Very excited for it, obviously, and hoping we can get the number one name being Haley Wynn. But either way, it's going to be a fun night.
Yeah, and like you said, there's definitely a lot of options for New York up there. And just looking at their roster there, I mean, their top 4 point scorers are all forwards, and Fillier, Eldridge, Carpenter, and Rock. And then Shelton and Zandy Hart are right behind them. So I think adding to the blue line would be a really good idea, especially with the power play ability of Haley Wynn and Nicole Gosling. But I mean, again, Kaltenkova could fill in at your 2C, your 3C, and just be that physical presence and be able to win net battles in front, be able to win battles on the boards, and also just become a nuisance as she was for Clarkson all those years right on the ice. So lots of exciting things happening in the PWHL, and I think that's where we're going to end it here. But this will continue this reporting. I mean, like Casey said, he's going to be boots on the ground in Ottawa for the player drafts, and of course, we're going to be covering the expansion draft as news comes in. So stay tuned for that. But very exciting offseason to get into for the PWHL, and we'll have some more content centered around women's hockey as we go through the summer, so be on the lookout for that.
Jake, you're probably getting sick of me talking here. Appreciate you sticking through the brunt of it. One more thing I'll throw in. Imagine Kaltenkova falls a couple spots and ends up in the hands of Ottawa, and the Kaltenkova-Serdachny combo comes back to life. That would be an absolute nuisance around the PWHL, something we had plenty of years of watching there, buddy. But what's going on for you? You just got back from the Guardians game. You're swinging them yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you got the next week or so?
So my men's league season is in full swing. We're 2-1 to start the year. I'm hitting 500. Very happy with that. 3 for 6. And I'm also coaching a team, a 15U team, local. And they're not doing as hot, but it is just the start of their season. So I'm excited to step into the world of coaching again. So we'll see how that goes. But I am running around like a chicken with my head cut off. So hopefully this will be like my grounding area when I get to talk puck with you guys. So, but very excited for the rest of the summer, and excited that Mr. Kapoor is back with his takes. And I'm sure hopefully we'll hear from Mr. Leonardo at some point, hopefully soon. But it's going to be a good summer, especially for the Fifth Liners podcast.
I realized why we named this the Fifth Liners. I got on the ice last week and our summer league sessions began. It was not the prettiest of games for me. Our team won 10-3, though. We have as many wins in week 1 as we did the entire season last year. We picked up this kid off the waiver wire that is a Division III player from Brockport, and probably feel bad for the guy a little bit because he's definitely out of place when you see me skating around there. But I am heading back east coming up here out west. I'm about to hang up and go outside. My cousin's graduation party's up next, and overcame a heart transplant last year and now is walking the stage. So pretty cool to see that. Then flying out of Vegas in a couple days, going to Bruno Mars tomorrow night. And maybe the most anticipated concert of my life. We just happened to look at the tickets this morning and saw, oh shoot, he's performing tomorrow. So my brother and I picked up tickets there. I think I've probably wanted to go see him for about a decade now. So I am super excited for that one. We'll see if I have a voice by next week coming up, but a couple exciting things to look forward to this week, buddy. But looking forward even more to the next time we get back together here. Looks like in about a week. We've got Colin for the entirety of the summer, thanks to him. And welcome back again to Colin Kapur here on our 1-year anniversary. Jake, let's also take a moment as we wrap it up here. And what a year it's been. And I want to say a big thank you to you. You've been one of the key pieces, as well as Matt, keeping this show on the ropes. And now it looks like we've got a big summer upcoming, kicking it off with AJ and a long list of guests that we're very excited for coming up this summer. But want to give a big thank you to you. How crazy is it that we've made it an entire year and still going strong here?
Yeah, definitely insane. And thank you for bringing me on. This has been so much fun, and just like a throwback to our booth days in the broadcast booth and just us going back and forth. So it really helps just get a lot of my opinions out there when I don't really have anyone to talk hockey to. So I appreciate it. And now we have a whole little friend group going on as well. I mean, the fifth liners that you've seen, Matt, Colin, and George and the rest. I mean, it's been so much fun to talk to them, and Matt Mugno as well. Somewhat newer face as well. We just keep picking up new faces as we go, and sometimes rediscovering old ones. So really excited to keep going, and hopefully you guys enjoy it as much as we do.
He's Jake Swanson. For Colin Kapur and Matthew Mugno, I'm Casey Ditzel. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at the Fifth Liners Pod. And we will be back with weekly shows, continuing hockey coverage throughout the offseason. One of the few shows that does not take the offseason off. And we are excited to just be getting going here, catching our stride as the Stanley Cup kicks off. We'll see if it's Jake and the rest getting their picks right, or if the Florida Panthers and our guy Nico Sturm can roll to a Stanley Cup. We'll find out where that stands about a week from now. Jake, we'll talk to you then. Until next time, everybody, have a good one.